General Hospital will reveal Brooke Lynn couldn't shake the overwhelming thoughts about why Camilla had kept the truth about Gio hidden until her dying breath. Despite Lois and Gloria's attempts to explain, Brooke Lynn found it impossible to trust her mother anymore. The sense of betrayal ran deep within her, and she was consumed with confusion. Why had Camilla, even in her final hours, chosen silence over honesty? The unanswered questions gnawed at her, leaving her heartbroken and furious. For years, she had believed in her mother's love and guidance, only to realize that the most important truth about her life had been kept from her. It was as if the rug had been pulled out from beneath her, and the realization that Camilla had never told her the truth about Gio, even when she had the chance, felt like a crushing blow. In the wake of this revelation, Brooke Lynn's emotions swirled with anger, sadness, and disbelief. She couldn't come to terms with the idea that the person she had trusted the most in the world had been hiding such a significant secret. This gnawing feeling of being deceived drove her to seek answers. She turned to Tracy, the one person in the Quartermain family who had always been a reliable confidant, someone she could trust to give her an honest perspective on the situation. Tracy, known for her sharp intellect and no-nonsense attitude, was the person Brooke Lynn needed in this moment of turmoil. She knew Tracy would not sugarcoat things but would provide the clarity and guidance she so desperately needed. When Brooke Lynn explained her deep hurt, her confusion, and her feelings of abandonment, Tracy listened intently, her expression unwavering. Tracy didn't offer immediate comfort, but rather a promise to get to the bottom of the matter. She immediately took action, calling in her trusted sources to dig into the mystery surrounding Camilla's death and Lois's role in keeping Joe's identity a secret for so long. Tracy knew the situation was far from simple, and she suspected that the truth had been buried under layers of manipulation and deceit. What Tracy uncovered sent shockwaves through Brooke Lynn. It wasn't just that Lois had kept the truth from her. It was that Lois had employed cruel and underhanded tactics to ensure that Camilla would remain silent. As Tracy dug deeper, she discovered that Lois had exerted pressure on Camilla in ways Brooke Lynn could never have imagined, coercing her to remain quiet, even in her final moments. Camilla's death wasn't merely a tragic loss, it was part of a much larger, more sinister web of manipulation. The more Tracy investigated, the clearer it became that Lois had played a far darker role than Brooke Lynn had ever realized. The one truth that Lois had desperately tried to suppress, the truth about Joe's parentage, was locked away by lies and power plays. When Brooke Lynn first approached Tracy for comfort, she was not just looking for a friend, she was desperately seeking an explanation for the secrets that had been concealed for so long. She had hoped that, in Tracy, she would find the key to unraveling the tangled mess of lies that had defined her family's history. Tracy, always the pragmatist, didn't waste time with pleasantries. She immediately set to work, using her network of trusted individuals to gather information and piece together the events that had led to this moment. Tracy's sharp investigative skills brought her face to face with people who had been directly involved in the adoption process of Gio and who had been privy to the decisions Lois and Gloria had made. As Tracy followed the trail, she began to uncover small but significant details that painted a troubling picture of what had really happened. Tracy's investigation was meticulous. She didn't just rely on family members. She spoke to others who had been in the periphery of the adoption, trying to understand the dynamics at play during those crucial years. What she learned was nothing short of shocking. Lois and Gloria had not only hidden Joe's true parentage but had gone to great lengths to ensure that Brooke Lynn would never know the truth. They had orchestrated a system of lies so perfectly that even Camilla, the very woman who had raised Gio, was pressured into silence, her hands tied by the manipulations of the Cerullo family. As Tracy uncovered the depths of Lois's machinations, she realized just how far Lois was willing to go to maintain control over the situation, no matter the cost. The discovery of these dark secrets only deepened Brooke Lynn's sense of betrayal. She had always admired Lois, but now she saw her in an entirely different light. The woman she had trusted to guide her through life was the very person who had betrayed her most profoundly. As Brooke Lynn processed the new information, she found herself torn between her love for her mother and the crushing realization that Lois had chosen her own selfish interests over the truth, her own daughter's well-being, and the family that should have been built on honesty. The lies and manipulation had hurt more than just Brooke Lynn, they had destroyed the foundation of the family she had once thought unbreakable. Tracy, ever the voice of reason, could see the toll this revelation was taking on Brooke Lynn. While she had been the one to uncover the truth, she knew that it wasn't enough to simply expose the lies. Brooke Lynn would have to come to terms with the reality of her family's actions, and that would be the hardest part. But for now, Tracy had given her something priceless: knowledge, the truth, and the strength to face the future with eyes wide open. As Brooke Lynn stood on the precipice of this newfound reality, she realized that the path forward would not be easy, but it would be her own, shaped by the truth that Tracy had helped her uncover. As the layers of deception began to peel away, Tracy's investigation led her to a chilling discovery that would forever alter Brooke Lynn's understanding of the events surrounding Joe's birth and adoption. What she uncovered went far beyond Lois's silence. Lois had employed underhanded and malicious tactics to ensure that Camilla would keep the secret of Joe's parentage hidden. Tracy's sources, a network of people who had been close to the situation, painted a disturbing picture of Lois's manipulation. It became clear that Lois hadn't simply chosen silence out of convenience or fear, she had actively threatened and coerced Camilla into keeping the truth buried. Tracy uncovered accounts from individuals who had been around Lois and Camilla during the final months of Camilla's life. These sources told stories of Lois's increasing pressure on Camilla, using guilt, intimidation, and even subtle threats to ensure that Camilla would not reveal the truth about Gio. The more Tracy delved into these accounts, the more she realized that Lois's actions had been driven by an overwhelming need to maintain control over the secret, control over the narrative, and, most disturbingly, control over Joe's identity. Lois's fear of being exposed for what she truly was, someone who had hidden the truth about her own son, was so consuming that she went to any length to protect herself, even if it meant manipulating and emotionally abusing the woman who had loved and cared for Gio as her own. But what disturbed Tracy the most was the realization that Lois's actions might have been directly tied to Camilla's death. As Tracy sifted through more evidence, she discovered that Camilla's passing was far from a mere coincidence. It seemed increasingly likely that her death was a result of the tremendous emotional and psychological strain Lois had placed on her. The more Tracy learned, the more it became apparent that Lois had been the driving force behind the secrecy that had consumed the Palmieri family for years. The situation had been carefully orchestrated by Lois to ensure that no one, not even Camilla in her final days, could bring the truth to light. Tracy found evidence that suggested Lois had manipulated Camilla's health and well-being, using subtle threats and emotional blackmail to make sure Camilla would die with the truth locked inside her. Tracy's sources described the pressure Camilla had been under, how she had become a shell of the woman she once was, fearful of the consequences if she ever spoke out. Some even went so far as to suggest that Lois had been so desperate to keep the secret that she may have pushed Camilla into a state of emotional despair, accelerating her physical decline. Tracy's growing concern was that Camilla's death had not been a simple accident, but rather the result of deliberate actions taken by Lois to safeguard her own secrets. There was talk among those who had been close to Camilla that Lois had intentionally kept her isolated during her last days, ensuring that she had no opportunity to communicate the truth to anyone. This isolation, combined with the emotional stress Lois had imposed on Camilla, left her unable to speak freely before her passing. Tracy's investigation revealed that, in Lois's eyes, the preservation of the family's reputation, and her own, was far more important than the truth or the well-being of those involved. As the full scope of Lois's manipulation and cruelty became evident, Tracy was left reeling. It wasn't just that Lois had kept Joe's parentage a secret, it was that she had destroyed the very person who had cared for him, all in an effort to shield herself from the consequences of her lies. The emotional toll of Lois's actions had reverberated throughout the entire family, but it was Camilla who had borne the brunt of it. The weight of the secret had broken her, both physically and mentally, and Tracy was left with the grim realization that Lois had played a significant role in that destruction. Tracy knew that she had to uncover every last detail of this twisted web if she was going to help Brooke Lynn understand what had really happened. But the deeper she dug, the more she uncovered about the lengths to which Lois had gone to protect her own interests at any cost. The more Tracy learned, the more she understood that Lois had been willing to do anything, even destroy a life, to keep the truth about Gio buried. Tracy's revelation was both heartbreaking and infuriating. The betrayal wasn't just about the secrets Lois had kept, it was about the lives she had ruined in the process. And now, as the truth began to come to light, it seemed that Lois's lies had not only caused irreparable damage to Camilla, but had also set the stage for a storm that was now about to engulf the entire family. With these revelations, Tracy's role in helping Brooke Lynn piece together the truth had a profound impact. Not only did Tracy clarify the situation, but she also made Brooke Lynn face the depth of the betrayal, causing her to constantly question everything that Lois and Gloria had done. The realization that the deceit was far more than just a simple lie hit Brooke Lynn with overwhelming force. It wasn't just a betrayal of trust, it was a betrayal that had far-reaching consequences, not only for Brooke Lynn but for Joe's life as well. The more she learned, the clearer it became that Lois and Gloria's actions had influenced and shaped the trajectory of Joe's life, leaving scars that would never heal. The entire Quartermaine family, which Brooke Lynn had once considered her foundation, had been impacted by the secrecy and lies that had been carefully constructed over the years. The weight of the lies began to sink in, and Brooke Lynn could no longer view her family in the same light. Everything she had believed about the love and loyalty of her family now seemed tainted, and every relationship felt like it had been built on a house of cards, ready to collapse at the slightest touch. Brooke Lynn's mind was racing as she headed back to the Quartermaine estate, determined to confront Lois and Gloria about the disturbing truth that had come to light. However, when she arrived, she found that Gio was nowhere to be found. His absence weighed heavily on her, and the tension in the air only deepened. The conversation she had expected with Lois and Gloria was no longer just a confrontation about the past, it was now a battle over trust, over loyalty, and over her very identity. Lois and Gloria, still clinging to their version of events, tried to explain away the past, but each word that left their lips only seemed to fuel Brooke Lynn's fury. The explanations they gave felt hollow, as if they were trying to rewrite history rather than face the truth. Gio, who had returned to the Quartermaine estate only to collect his remaining belongings and leave for good, had become the center of a whirlwind of emotions. The act of him leaving without so much as a goodbye to the family that had claimed him as their own was a painful reminder to Brooke Lynn that he didn't feel like he had a place there. As she stood there, her heart heavy with the realization that Gio wanted nothing to do with her, it became clear that the relationship they had could never be repaired so easily. The truth about his parentage had shattered any hopes for a familial bond, and now, Joe's departure felt like the final nail in the coffin. Lois, ever the protector, had once again stepped in to defend Brooke Lynn, but her actions only made the situation more complicated. In that moment, Brooke Lynn couldn't help but feel both a sense of anger and sadness. Lois had always been there for her, or at least, she had thought so, but now her interference only felt like an added weight on Brooke Lynn's already fragile emotions. Lois's defense of her, while seemingly well-intentioned, only highlighted how much she still didn't understand the pain that Brooke Lynn was going through. In trying to protect her, Lois had only served to deepen the rift between them. Meanwhile, Gloria, in her usual blunt manner, tried to justify the family's actions, suggesting that Gio should be grateful for the life they had provided him. According to Gloria, they had given him a home, a family, and stability, things that many children in foster care would never experience. However, to Gio, these words fell flat. His heart ached with the realization that while he had been given material comfort, it had come at the cost of his truth. He had been raised in a lie, surrounded by people who claimed to love him but had ultimately kept the most important part of his identity from him. Gio could no longer stand by and accept this, no matter how much Gloria tried to paint it as a gift. His anger bubbled over as he processed the years of manipulation, culminating in the crushing revelation that Camilla, the woman who had loved him as her own, had been forced into silence. The pain of that realization was too much for Gio to bear. His mother figure, the one person he had believed would protect him no matter what, had been silenced by the very people who were supposed to care for him. That betrayal cut deeper than any other, and as Gio looked at the Quartermain family, he knew he couldn't remain part of a family that had built itself on such a fragile foundation. His decision to leave was not one made lightly, but it was one that had been brewing for years. No matter how much Brooke Lynn or the Quartermains tried to convince him otherwise, Gio had made up his mind. He would never return to the estate, not under these circumstances. He had no place in a family that had never truly embraced him as their own, not when they had kept him in the dark about the most fundamental truth of his life. Brooke Lynn stood there, watching as Joe's departure marked the end of something she had never fully understood. The bitterness and anger that had built up inside her now festered, leaving her questioning everything, her mother, her family, and the lies that had led to this point. No one seemed to have the answers she was desperately searching for. With Gio gone and the family unraveling, Brooke Lynn was left with a profound emptiness. The questions of what could have been and what was lost now weighed heavily on her shoulders. Could she ever rebuild what was broken? Could she forgive Lois and Gloria for their actions? Would the Quartermains ever be the family she once believed them to be? The answers were far from clear, and Brooke Lynn was left to navigate the wreckage of her past alone, with the painful knowledge that the truth she had uncovered had irrevocably changed everything. With everything that had happened, Brooke Lynn could no longer bear it and decided that Lois and Gloria could no longer exist in her life. She ordered both of them to leave, refusing to ever see their faces again. Lois, despite intending to pack her things, was shouted at by Brooke Lynn, who declared that she would send everything to Bensonhurst. After Lois and Gloria left, Gio began to see things more clearly. He admitted that he, like Brooke Lynn, had been deceived and hurt. The feeling of betrayal and anger surged within Gio. Despite that, he made the decision not to return to the Quartermain family, unwilling to be a part of the lives of people who, in his eyes, had never truly accepted him. Gio realized that his life had not only been distorted by lies, but also by unclear relationships within a family full of secrets and betrayals. All these truths now surrounded Brooke Lynn, and she was forced to confront the heavy consequences of the lies. The feeling of betrayal and the constant doubt tore at her, leaving her unable to find peace within herself. Would she be able to forgive Lois and Gloria, or would she forever live with the feeling of being deceived and losing trust in the people she once loved? Everything remained unclear, and the unanswered questions could change her life forever.